Hi everyone, welcome back to another video with Serofox Tutoring. My name is Douglas, and in this video we'll be going through how to write an essay. So we'll be incorporating everything we've learned in the previous videos on writing an essay, and I'll be going through analyzing the question, to planning an essay, to picking a text, to writing the actual essay, and then giving you guys some final tips at the end that I've used in writing my essay to help you guys improve your writing as well. Now, before we get into that, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for not putting out a video for so long. Thank you guys so much for watching all of my videos. I know it's not a lot of views, but it means a lot to me. And my whole plan this year is to basically improve the quality and the frequency of all the videos. As you can see, I've gotten a new introduction put in as well, and you can see me on the little webcam there. So hopefully it helps you guys to kind of put a face to the voice you're actually hearing. Alright, so the plan for this year is to basically upload a lot more videos, and I'll also have a bunch of free resources that you guys can download from my website. And these will include sample essays, sample short responses, interpretive text, creative text, and persuasive text. Unfortunately, I won't be able to explain everything that I do in those kinds of texts, but I'll try to do as much as possible, and I'll try to include them in my videos as much as possible to help you guys gain a better understanding of how I write, what I write, and to help you guys improve your writing as well. So without further ado, let's get straight into the content for this video. Okay, so the question is, reflect on how at least one text works to challenge or endorse a controversial perspective. So the important thing about this question is that whatever text you pick, you have to make sure it actually challenges or endorses a particular perspective that is controversial. It can't just explore a controversial issue, it actually has to pick a side. Does it say that that controversial issue is right, or does it say that controversial issue is wrong? So make sure the text you pick has a particular perspective, it picks a particular side. Once you've done that, you have to think about how the text creator has used techniques. So that's the how part of the question, right? So how has the text creator used techniques to challenge or endorse this particular controversial perspective? Very, very simple. Now, the text that I have chosen is called Chasing Ice by Jeff Orlowski, and that was released in 2012. And the whole idea of this documentary is to endorse the fact that climate change is a real phenomenon. It's something real, and obviously climate change is something that's very controversial because some people believe in it, some people don't believe in it. So in this case, this documentary endorses the fact that it's real. It obviously believes in the idea that climate change is real, and that's reflected in my thesis over here, to endorse the perspective that human-induced climate change is an observable phenomenon. So before we go into the rest of the plan, let me explain to you a little bit about what this documentary is about. So Jeff Orlowski, the director of this documentary, follows the story of a National Geographic photographer named James Ballard. And so James Ballard and his team set out and created this thing called the Extreme Ice Survey, I believe it's called. And they basically travel the world to all these glaciers and ice landforms and landscapes around the world. And they basically set up cameras there. So they hike to the most remote regions of the world. They set up cameras filming these glaciers over a span of months to maybe years. And the idea is that they literally film these glaciers and these landforms around the world melting. And back when this documentary was released, it was basically visual evidence that people could see that climate change was real, because if you can actually see the ice melting, then obviously, you know, it must be real, right? And if you can see ice melting all around the world, then that's some pretty strong evidence that climate change is actually real. Okay, so from that documentary, how has that documentary endorsed the perspective that human-induced climate change is real? Well, with three main reasons that I have separated each into a paragraph, because obviously I have my three body paragraphs in my essay. So the first way is by appealing to our sense of beauty and wonder. And what I mean by that is, in the documentary, he shows us very beautiful glaciers and ice landscapes, and then he also shows us videos of those things getting destroyed. And by doing that, it kind of violates the audience's sense of wanting to preserve things that are beautiful. And so by wanting to preserve those things that are beautiful, we can see that they're getting destroyed. Therefore, it endorses the perspective that climate change is real, because it basically wants the audience to kind of save those things. And the only way that we can save those things is by accepting the reality of climate change. The second reason is by appealing to the audience's sense of fear. So what I mean by this, it's basically trying to scare the audience into accepting climate change as a reality. So the final paragraph is on emphasizing the importance of capturing the truth by also documenting James Ballard's personal story. So the interesting thing about this documentary is that it doesn't just present the images or the facts of climate change, trying to persuade the audience that climate change is real, trying to endorse the perspective that climate change is real. It also captures the story of James Ballard as he goes through and captures all this footage and evidence. And the issue with this is that James Ballard has a very bad knee. He has to do a lot of surgeries on it to fix it. And the problem with that is he is traveling and hiking and traversing some of the most isolated and rugged terrain on Earth possible. So obviously this is not good for his knee. So he's basically suffering as he goes through his journey to collect all of this evidence. So by showing us this part of Ballard's personal story, the audience is able to sympathize with him and empathize with him, because we think that why would someone go through all of this suffering and all of this pain to document something that isn't true? And so it must be true if he's going through all of this suffering to document it, right? And therefore, this documentary endorses climate change by showing that part of Ballard's personal story. Also, just in case you didn't understand anything I said in the past 5 minutes, here is all the footage that I've used in my plan when I wrote this essay. So enjoy.
There's this limitless universe of forms out there that is just surreal, otherworldly, sculptural, architectural, insanely, ridiculously beautiful. And that's when I thought, okay, the story is in the ice, somehow.
Right there where Bob is, stand right there. That's exactly where the ice was, right there. Right, over?
Correct, this is where...
That glacier had changed so much that, I'm not kidding, for like 3 hours we stood there looking at the prints of 6 months ago, looking at the glacier going, we must be wrong, we can't be in the right places. Appear to be from over there. And when I saw those, the lights went off for me. I realized the public doesn't want to hear about more statistical studies, more computer models, more projections. What they need is a believable, understandable piece of visual evidence, something that grabs them in the gut. VING. Ever since glaciers have entered the ocean, hundreds of thousands of years ago, ice has always calved off. But what we're seeing now is the Greenland ice sheet thinning out and dumping ever more ice and water into the ocean.
I've discovered some trends in the number and in the losses natural perils have caused. And interestingly, for the weather-related events, our activities, primarily greenhouse gas emissions, are already contributing to more intense and more events. It cannot be explained by just better reporting. It has to be explained by changes in the atmospheric conditions.
Imagine if
The latest estimates for rebuilding from Irene, already $7 billion.
2011 is now on track to be the most expensive year ever for weather-related damage.
A drought of historic proportions has hit Nepal.
the horror of raging wildfires has again returned to Russia.
They say it was like nothing they've ever seen before.
16 of the last 20 years are the hottest on record.
There were audible chunks of gravel-like substances that I could feel rolling around in there.
Bionic man.
I was covering up the soreness with anti-inflammatories and painkillers so that I could function in the field, and I would think, oh, that's pretty good, not so bad. But the drugs were masking the symptoms way more than I had realized.
Thank you. Love you.
Jim was told after his surgery that hiking is not a form of exercise that they want him to pursue anymore. I'm not sure that's sunken in quite yet.
I think when we started out, the glacier was approximately right here. It might have been there, it might have been here, but it's in this zone somewhere.
Hopefully all of that footage helped everything make much more sense, and so here is the essay that I've actually written. In an age of information and empirical thinking, it is such a wonder that scientific evidence can sometimes fail to convince others of reality. Chasing Ice by Jeff Orlowski follows the efforts of nature photographer James Ballard, who attempts to challenge the perspective of climate change deniers not through facts, but through the power of photography and effective storytelling. The scientific consensus is that there is no consensus. Orlowski and Ballard both understand the conflicting and complicated evidence that caused the public to reject climate science and has failed to convince politicians and policymakers to curb excessive greenhouse gas emissions. Instead, Orlowski endorses the perspective that climate change is an observable phenomenon caused by human activity by appealing to the audience's emotions and through dramatic storytelling. Through Ballard's work, Orlowski endorses the reality of climate change by appealing to the audience's desire to preserve things that inspire beauty and wonder. Captivating images of glaciers and Arctic landscapes are presented to the audience in a stunning montage of natural, exotic colors and shapes. In addition, Ballard narrates over the montage in a calm, passionate tone supported by awe-inspiring background music. These techniques are used to emphasize the beauty and rarity of these landforms. The montage is juxtaposed with the use of video clips highlighting the deflation and carving of glaciers all around the world. Here, Ballard has a concerned tone in his narration, which is complemented by deep, ominous background music. These two elements are juxtaposed against one another to invite a sense of dread and destruction in the audience. Orlowski attempts to violate the audience's sense of beauty as they witness what is beautiful get destroyed. This is one of the ways in which Orlowski uses the emotive power of photography to appeal to the audience's desire to preserve beauty, which leads them to acknowledge the existence of human-induced climate change. Orlowski also appeals to the audience's sense of fear in an attempt to persuade them of the reality of climate change. Factual evidence is animated and visualized in graphs and infographics to simplify the complicated evidence surrounding climate change. In one example, a graph showing the number of US-related climate disasters is shown. A slow animated red line is used to show an upward trend of the number of natural disasters. The animated red line dramatizes the trend of increasing natural disasters, which is emphasized by its slow movement, red color, which has connotations to danger, and dramatic music. By simplifying the statistics and dramatizing its interpretation, Orlowski emphasizes the increasingly negative impact of climate change, foreshadowing a bleak future and inviting in the audience a sense of worry. A montage of archival news footage is also used depicting catastrophic natural disasters, including phrases such as most expensive year ever for weather-related damage. This is also used to scare the audience into accepting that climate change is a reality that can be observed by the consistent number of record-breaking disasters in recent times. By appealing to the viewer's sense of fear, Orlowski attempts to scare viewers into accepting and endorsing climate change as a reality. In addition to documenting the effects of climate change, Chasing Ice also follows the journey of Ballard as he captures his photographs and footage. By doing so, Orlowski can emphasize the ordeals in which Ballard and his crew endure to present their perspective, increasing its legitimacy. For example, when documenting Ballard's knee surgery, dramatic music is used to emphasize the severity of his condition. His wife solemnly narrates that hiking is not a form of exercise the doctors want him to pursue. The use of music and voice appeals to the audience's sympathy for Ballard's health and encourages them to feel concern for him. This scene is then juxtaposed with a close shot of Ballard's feet immediately back hiking with his crew, focusing on the rugged terrain. The purpose of the juxtaposition is to illustrate Ballard's dedication to the audience so that they can empathize with his passion for documenting what he believes to be true, and by extension, persuades them to also accept the perspective that climate change is a real phenomenon. Orlowski attempts to endorse the perspective that climate change is a real, observable issue, not through the use of facts, but by employing a variety of techniques to appeal to the audience's emotions. He appeals to a sense of beauty and fear using Ballard's work, and by documenting Ballard's hardships in his journey to document the melting process of glaciers and ice sheets. In doing so, he endorses his perspective by inspiring a desire in his audience to protect the glaciers, ice sheets, and Earth from human-induced climate change. And there we go. So this will be available for download on my website shortly, and a bunch of different examples like this as well. So keep your eyes on the website if you are keen for examples like this to help you improve your writing. Okay, so let's have a look through the essay and talk about a couple tips which you can use to immediately improve your writing. So starting from the introduction, there are 2 points that I want to make here. The first point is about the global statement. So if you have a read of my global statement, it achieves the 2 purposes that a global statement should achieve. The first purpose is to hook your audience or hook your reader into actually thinking that your essay is interesting. The second purpose of your global statement is to introduce your topic. So what is your essay actually about? So in this case, I wrote, "In an age of information and empirical thinking, it is such a wonder that scientific evidence can sometimes fail to convince others of reality." So when people read that, they're like, oh my God, like, in what situation will scientific evidence not convince someone that something is real? So they'll be like, this is so strange, I'm going to read on. So that's the way that I kind of like trick people into reading my essay, I guess. But at the same time, it introduces the topic of climate change, because that is exactly what's going on. People have different interpretations of what the science is all about, and that's why there's the whole controversy. Some people think that, yep, this evidence definitely suggests that climate change is real. On the other hand, people are like, nah, this data does not support climate change whatsoever. People misinterpret it, whatever. Okay, so that's basically the whole controversy of climate change, and that's how I introduce it and also hook readers into thinking that my essay is actually interesting. The second point that I wanted to make about the introduction is that it's super, super important not to retell your story. So notice how I talk about the actual text that I write. So notice how I talk about the text Chasing Ice. I don't talk about what actually happens in the documentary, but I talk about the text in terms of its course concepts. So in this case, the question is basically asking about a controversial issue, right? So I think that it's important to talk about both sides of the issue, why it's controversial, and to give a bit of context surrounding the issue as a whole. And so that is what I've done in my introduction, to introduce my essay and to introduce the whole idea of what this controversial issue is. Let's say you get a question asking you about ideas in the text or themes or values, then that's what you would write about in your introduction. And that makes sense, right? Because you don't want to be retelling the story. It doesn't add anything to your essay, or it doesn't add anything to your argument. What you want to be doing is to be talking about your text in terms of the course concepts related to the question. And that makes sense because you want to be introducing what your essay is actually about. So those are the 2 biggest tips that I can give you for my introduction. For my body paragraphs, if you have a read, or if you go back through the video and listen to me read through it again, you'll notice that the techniques that I talk about aren't very complicated, and they don't have to be very complicated. The thing that you need that's most important in your body paragraph is explaining these techniques in a way that makes sense. And the better that you can explain these techniques, the more marks you're going to be getting, basically, because the explanation section of your body paragraph is where you get most of your marks, and that's where you demonstrate your understanding of what the text is about, right? So the first thing is, notice how the techniques that I've chosen are very, very simple. You don't have to look for the craziest techniques out there, because they don't really help you if you can't really explain what they're about. The second thing is that have a look at how I've picked techniques. I don't just pick one technique, but I talk about how techniques work together. And I think that shows a very complex understanding of a text, because in reality, techniques are used in the text to work together. They don't just exist by themselves, right? They kind of complement each other. And that's what I'm trying to show here by saying how all of these techniques emphasize the same point. And as for the conclusion, it's just, conclusions are very, very simple. Notice how my conclusion is basically my conclusion is basically just a paragraph made up of 3 sentences. And then all I have to do is rehash all the points that I made in my essay, and also make sure not to talk about anything new. So it's okay to repeat yourself. I know sometimes you feel like you're repeating yourself too much, but that's the point of the conclusion, is to bring everything together, right? And a lot of people, because they get scared that they're repeating themselves too much, they try to use a bunch of different synonyms and words. But sometimes when you do that, the synonyms are just too far off from what you're actually trying to say, so it feels like you're adding something new to your conclusion. So just try to keep the words that you use similar to the rest of your essay, so it feels very cohesive and it all makes sense at the end. And that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you liked the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see videos similar to this one. I'll see you guys on the next video.